understand these graphs, we have 15 people that made the list in Afghanistan at a population of 39 million people. How common is to be a Forbes Under 30 if you are in Afghanistan? You are 1 in 2.6 million. For Albania, they have 4 people, 1 in 700,000 people. Australia, they have 222 Forbes Global List Makers. They are the 7th country in the world based on the number of list makers. And how common are list makers in their country? There are 1 in 114,000 people, and there are 12 in the global ranking. Austria, they have 33, 1 in almost 300,000. Azerbaijan, at a population of 10, makes 1 in 3 million. Bahamas, young elite reveal, we see that there is only 1. Bangladesh, 1 in almost 6 million people. Barbados, they have 6 persons and 1 in 47,000 people. So here we see a really small country is ranking 3rd as the most common to be a lister in that country. Belarus, they have 6 list makers, 1 person in 1.6 million people. In Belgium, there is 41 persons. There is 1 in almost 300,000 people. In Belize, there is only 1 list maker. In Bhutan, same. Bosnia and Herzegovina, there are 2 list makers in a country of 3.3. In Bulgaria, we have 18 list makers at a population of 7 million, meaning 1 in 386,000 people. Cambodia, 1 in 2 million people. In Canada, we see Canada is the 5th in the world. We have 312 list makers, 1 in 121,000 people is a list maker. In China, they only have 1 in 3.3 million, and they are ranking on 4th as the global list makers. Costa Rica, we have 2 people in Costa Rica, 1 in 2.5 million. Croatia, we have 10 list makers, so 1 in 400,000. Cyprus, being a small island, but they have 5 list makers. Czech Republic, 1 in 2 million. Czechia, 1 in 2.7 million. Denmark, they are ranking 7 as most common. They have 68 list makers, and almost 1 in less than 100,000 is a list maker. Estonia is ranking on 6 with 1 in 82,000. In Fiji, we have 1 in 300,000 people. Finland, 31 people, so 1 in almost 200,000 people is a list maker. In France, we have 221, ranking it the 8th country as number of list makers. In Georgia, we have 3 persons, 1.3 million people. Germany, we have 280 people, and they have 1 in 300,000 people being a list maker. Greece, almost 600,000. Hong Kong, we see it is kind of entrepreneurial, and there is 1 in 110,000 people. Hungary, they have 1 in 700,000. India, they have 687 list makers, being the 3rd country by the number of list makers. 1 in every 2 million persons is a list maker. Indonesia, 154 persons. How common they are? 1 in almost 2 million people. Ireland, there is 1 in 86,000, so it's top 10 as most common. Israel, only 22. Italy, 96 list makers, 1 in 600,000 people. Jamaica, there are only 2. Japan, we have 183 list makers. Kazakhstan, 1 in 2 million. Kosovo, 1 in 300,000. Kuwait, we have just 2 persons. Latvia, we have 7 list makers, 1 in almost 300,000. Lebanon, we have 7 list makers, 1 in almost 1 million. Lithuania, we have 1 in 300,000. Luxembourg, they only have 1. Macedonia, 3 list makers. Malaysia, 1 in 400,000 with 7. Maldives, there is only 1 person. Malta, there are 2 persons. Mauritius, 2. 23 persons in Mexico. Moldova, there are 2 persons. And in Monaco, they are the most common listers. Mongolia, you are almost 1 in a million. Myanmar, there are 14 list makers, but at a population of over 50 million, then you are just 1 in almost 4 million. Nepal, you are 1 in 1 million. Netherlands, 1 in 186,000, and they are ranking 16, also on the number of list makers, 92, and also on the number of how common listers per country. New Zealand, 1 in 100,000, and they have 46 list makers. North Macedonia, 1 in 700,000. Norway, 1 in 300,000. Pakistan, 1 in 3.5 million. So they have 63 list makers, but at a population of over 200 million. The Philippines, 1.7 million. Holland, 1 in 900,000. Portugal, 1 in 350,000. Puerto Rico, 1 in 1 million. Romanian, 1 in 900,000. Russia, we have just 26 list makers, making it one of the least common country to be on the 4th list. If you are on the list, you're 1 every 5.6 million persons. Serbia, 1 in 1.5 million. Singapore is ranking 2, and Singapore, this is the actual, like, we can see like hardcore entrepreneurship happening here. If we were talking about Monaco, yeah, a small country, but here in Singapore, we see 145 list makers, ranking number 12 on the list of list makers. But this is at a population of 5.9 million, making it number 2 on how common are listers per country, with 1 in every 40,000 people on the Forbes Under 30 list. Slovakia, 1.1 million. Slovenia, 1 in 300,000. South Korea, they are ranking 9 in the world and 1 in almost 300,000. In Spain, we have 100 list makers, 1 in almost half a million. And in Sri Lanka, 1.6 million. Sweden, 1 in 100,000 people. They have 104 list makers. Switzerland, 8.7 million, 68 list makers. So 1 in more than 100,000 people is a list maker. Syria, 4 list makers, 1 in 4 million. Taiwan, 29 list makers. Thailand, 1 in 2 million, 34 list makers. If you are in Turkey, as common as 1 in 7 million people. In Ukraine, 36 list makers, 1 in every 1.2 million. United Arab Emirates, there are 3 list makers at a population of 10 million, so just 3.3 million. UK, this is after the US, the second country as number of list makers, over 1,100 list makers, meaning 1 in every 63,000 people in the UK, and spoiler alert, more than half of these live in London. Fourth country as most common Forbes Under 30 people that you can find. In US is ranking 5th with almost 5,000 list makers, ranking number 1. Now Vietnam, there are 28 list makers. That means that if you have a list maker in Vietnam, you are 1 in 3.5 million.